Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to look at a dark classic, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, I read this book as an adult. In fact, what inspired me to read this book was another video by a very, very good YouTuber and one of my favorites, Dominic Noble. This is one of his older videos where he compared, it's one of his Lost in Adaptation videos, where he compares books to the movies they are based on. So he compared Dracula the book to, I can't remember who the director, the Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, Bram Stoker's Dracula thing. That was kind of interesting. So I would check out his review because he does a really good job. Again, this is old stuff. He does some great stuff. Monitors, that's primarily what he does, is he compares films to the books they are supposedly based on, and that's what got me hooked on his channel. So, however, he inspired me to actually read Dracula, which I had never done before. It was surprising considering I spent literally 2 years in Transylvania. Yes, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I served in a little town called Zalo in Romania, badly teaching Hungarians English. I wasn't very good at it. I thoroughly admit that I was not any good at it. I was not prepared and not trained very well because the Peace Corps is not specifically good at training. But I never actually read Dracula. So it was interesting when I got around to actually reading it. And yes, there's going to be some comparisons to a lot of the mythology behind there and vampires, because you can't really get away from that. Vampires are very interesting. I find vampires interesting. But I find death interesting because I'm weird. But, so back to the book. Now, this is not something I would recommend to read to anyone probably under the age of 10 at minimum. Just because there's a lot of gruesome, kind of dark stuff in this, and death and child murder. So it's not described too much it's not very graphic, but it's graphic enough. And again, child murder and women dying and blood and more murder and death because Dracula. So this story is actually very interesting in the fact that the author Bram Stoker is not normally an author. I think he was some sort of assistant in the theater industry. And the book Dracula is not written as a narrative. It's written as a series of newspaper articles, letters, diary entries, stuff like that. So, in fact, at one point in time, you start off with Jonathan Harker, who's the main character, at least at first, in his trip to Transylvania. And we're going to run into one of the interesting things here. Dracula's not Romanian. He's in Romania, but he's not Romanian. It's very much implied that they are in the Carpathian Mountains, which are definitely maps of Romania. You have two mountain ranges in Romania. One goes east to west, one goes north to south. The Carpathians go north to south. They hit the Transylvanian Alps. They make kind of an L shape. I was in the middle. There's an eye of mountains kind of situated in there. It's almost like a look of a fish. I was in the eye of mountains. But Dracula takes place in the Carpathians, which are the mountains that are going north to south. So, and he's in a specific area that is actually not known for Romanians. It's known for a sect of Hungarians by the name of the Székely. So they're actually they're separate from the rest of the Hungarians in the rest of the country. They're known to be a tad bit weird. So apparently they were known to be a tad bit weird back then too, and kind of separate from the rest of the Hungarians. So Dracula, seemingly, in his castle in the Carpathian Mountains, is not Romanian. He seems to be part of the Székely. And he also interacts with the gypsy people there, which are not looked friendly upon by anyone in Europe for various reasons. It's complicated. I dealt with it when I was in Romania. It's complicated. And I think when I was there, the French tried to kick them out of their country and got in trouble for it. But you see them in this film villainized, which is not uncommon in Europe for the gypsies to be villainized. So, but again, big thing. Dracula's more Hungarian than he is Romanian, despite the fact that they are in the Transylvanian Alps. And they are actually on the eastern edge of Transylvania, of the region known as Transylvania. He's bumping up to where I looked it up on the map. Like, okay, so he's bumping up against Moldova. He's on that eastern edge of Romania. So that's interesting to me, just because I lived in the country for 2 years. So Jonathan Harker comes down from England, so it's a long trip. He takes a train. Then he gets to a small town, and he gets a carriage, and the people try to prevent him. It's like, do you really want to go here in this tiny little village? And he goes, and he ends up locked in Dracula's castle, and eventually realizes what Dracula is. And then you see his wives and eating children, and then he gets locked up, and Dracula leaves, and Jonathan disappears. Essentially, you don't hear about him for a while. You jump to England, where you interact with his fiancée, Mina, and her best friend, Lucy. And you get into that story where Lucy has 3 different suitors, and then she starts getting ill, and they call a doctor friend, and they do blood transfusions, and they're basically both her and her mother end up dying. But Van Helsing, who's the doctor they called, and they've been trying to do blood transfusions, finally figures out, with the help of Mina, what the heck happened. And it's like, okay, vampire, she's the undead. So he first originally wants to kill her. He originally tried to protect her by covering her with garlic. So, but that didn't work. And she dies. Mommy dies. They keep leaving the bloody windows open, which is how Dracula gets in. And you don't know really about his ability to transform at this point. I don't think Harker had seen anything yet, and he of course didn't respond back to it. So Mina has no idea he's interacted with him, and she doesn't know where the heck he's at. Mind you, by this time she's actually, after Lucy gets sick, she's actually called away. So they're writing letters back and forth, but she's summoned to, I believe it's somewhere in Romania. It might be have to look back at the book. I believe it might be Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania. Is that, or it's Budapest, which is in Hungary. I can't remember. I think it's Budapest, which is where they find him, which would be very, very weird considering how far away it is. But nonetheless, she goes to Jonathan, who's been found ill, and she's nursing him back to health, and she finally finds his diaries and reads it and realizes, oh dear God. So, and he kind of tells her what happened, how he was able to escape, and then he was rescued by townspeople there and taken away, and they kind of, they know something is dark there, and they know it's evil, because obviously it's killing children. It's killing babies, whatever it is. So Mina's with Jonathan, and you kind of get that story after a while. That, because she basically gets a letter saying that Lucy's dead. So her and Jonathan head back because they realize, okay, there's a vampire issue. And you get I do believe there's another side story here where you get the story of and this is through a newspaper article, of the ship where Dracula ships all his dirt and himself, and slowly eats his way through the ships of, I believe it's the Dawn Trader is the name of the ship, until the captain is all that's left, and he lashes himself to the steering wheel of the ship. I'm probably mispronouncing that. The wheel of the ship, and dies of exposure. He ties his hands with the rosary because he doesn't want to be bitten by this monster. So, and then the ship gets there. It travels around, and because Dracula can control the wind, it gets there probably faster, and it gets to England, and he goes after Lucy. So that's his first victim. He does eventually bite Mina, probably because they disregard her. So Jonathan gets back. Mina's kind of put to the side, and they're hunting around trying to destroy all this dirt, deal with rats, which he controls animals. You figure out he controls wolves, he controls rats, and the other thing that's interesting that you really don't see in a lot of the depictions, and I'll get into that, is he can walk around in daylight. So he just doesn't have any power. His most power is at night and at noon. Yes, noon in the day. So otherwise he has very diminished power. He can't shapeshift during those times. So during most of the day he can't shapeshift. He can, however, walk around. So you don't actually see, after the beginning, you don't see Dracula again until they kill him. You hear about him. You see what he does. You hear the people talk about him. But you don't see him until they kill him, because they realize they slowly destroy all of his dirt and he hightails it out of there. They do kill Mina, or not Mina, but Lucy. They realize before she actually eats a child, I believe, they stab her and cover her in garlic. I think they possibly might cut out her heart, I'm not sure. But yes, they kill, and then by also killing Dracula, because they follow him back over land, because he goes by sea back to his castle. And I believe they get into the castle, they get there before him. I don't know if they kill the wives or not. They do kill Dracula before the sun sets. So they basically stab him because he's hiding in his dirt coffin, because he needs dirt from his homeland in order to really survive. That's where his power lies. So, and it's an interesting book. It's very dark. It's very romanticized in a sense. It's a fun read if you're older and you're into kind of the dark kind of horror books. And it's very interesting considering all the vampire lore that you have. So I'm going to kind of get into that. One, as I mentioned, Dracula can walk around in the daylight, which is all, for some reason, I think Nosferatu, the film that shouldn't exist because it violates copyright, and yet it was saved, is the one that shows that he burns up in sunlight. And again, in the original book, he doesn't. He just doesn't have any power during sunlight. He's not romanticized. He's a scary, disgusting thing. He can walk around looking like a normal human, but he crawls down castle walls on his all fours. He's a creepy thing. So Mina does not want to have a relationship with him, which is what's in the Bram Stoker Dracula film with Winona Ryder. No, none of that happens. There's no running around naked or in wet clothing. Yeah, no, that does not happen. But it again, you have Dracula who he has power at noon in the day. I mean, he can walk around quite well during the day. He doesn't have to sleep in a coffin. I think he might choose to, but it has to be his native dirt. There is no backstory of why Dracula became Dracula. They don't even think about that. So it's not mentioned at all. I know some of the films give them tragic backstories, and then they give various sparkly vampires, and Anne Rice does some interesting, sexy vampires. I may cover those books at some point, but I don't think so. Most people can do a heck of a lot better. Maven of the Eventide does a lot of vampire stuff. She's a good YouTuber who's very much into those books, those types of books, and is far better at this than I am. Because she's been doing it a while, and I think she's a professional author herself. So check out her channel if you want more Dracula stuff. This is kind of the basic covering of this book from an educational point of view. It's a good book. I mean, if your kid's into vampires, this is the original vampire story, written in a very interesting format, which actually makes it a little bit easier to read because it's not a block of text. You have different formats of letters and newspaper articles and diary entries. So it's a good way to kind of look at that. And that's really where you would piece together, if you have a history background like I do, that's how you piece together stories, is from some of the primary documents. It's newspaper articles and diaries and letters. So it's a good way to kind of teach that. It's a good book to look at different formats. So, and it's a dark but interesting story to tell how this creature exists and how they're hunting. And it's very much of a mystery and suspense story. Not so much horror. I mean, there's horror elements to it. It's very dark, but it's very much suspense more, and mystery, and trying to figure things out and piece things together so you can destroy this monster. So, again, I enjoy it, and I'm not a horror fan, so I would recommend it. Depending on your kids' not only reading level, but maturity and interest, because again, dark, killing babies. Sensitivity level is an important thing with this book. Maybe 10 would be the youngest, but again, you know your kids. With one of these types of books, it's subjective. It's parents, you know your kids and what they can read and what their maturity level is. So, a great book. If you want to do stuff around Halloween, this is a good book to read. If not, you could probably read it anytime. It's a fun book. It's not that long. That's the other thing. It's not a long book. So it's a good, easy read, and to an extent. And it's fun if it's dark and kind of creepy as well. So that is it. Not obviously a highly intense review of this book, but again, it's not very long. And I don't have a physical copy. I read it online. You might be able, I'm thinking Bram Stoker's out of copyright, so you could probably, I would be surprised considering all the renditions. So you can probably find it at Project Gutenberg for free. So, but again, great book, kind of dark. Obviously, it's Dracula. It's good to look at these strange things that don't happen, like, you know, he doesn't burn up in sunlight. He can transform into a couple different things. He can control things. He has to be around his own dirt. And no, he's not handsome and appealing in any way whatsoever. Nor is he related to, and I should probably touch on this, Vlad Dracula, who was a prince who was known as a Christian fighting off the Ottoman Turks in Romania. So for any of you interested in traveling to Romania, Vlad the Impaler is a hero in that country. They don't like Dracula. In fact, Bran Castle is a tourist attraction, and that's it. I spent time in a town called Trgovište, which has one of Vlad Dracula's the ruins of one of his original castles. Because he is not from Transylvania. He is from Wallachia, which is in the south of the country. So, yeah, they got a lot of it wrong. And again, Dracula's castle is on the leading edge between Moldova, the province, not the country, of Romania, and Transylvania in the Carpathian Mountains. A beautiful place if you ever want to visit there, but again, they're not particularly always fond of Dracula, just because it's irritating. So, but that is it for this review. I'm going to be doing a bunch of Halloween stuff. Let's say this is actually going to be my last video. So I've done a bunch of Halloween stuff. So this is actually going to be the last video. I'm filming these things out of order because it happens. So enjoy Halloween. If you like this review, check out my other reviews. I have a bunch of Halloween stuff. I have all of Harry Potter. I have a bunch of other children's book reviews. I have more to come, as well as a sprinkling of homeschooling stuff for secular families or non-religious, and some speckling of travel stuff. So that is it for this review. Again, like and subscribe if you like what you see. Thank you.